Hi, my name is Dr. Joshua Palkki from California State University, Long Beach. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm excited to share some ideas with you about gender equity and on-require policies. This is a really complex topic, and I'll just be able to scratch the surface and talk about a few different facets of this interesting and important and timely topic. So I'm hoping that this presentation will spark some dialogue in the Q&A and even after that, so that we here in Western Division ACDA can be as inclusive as possible as we are planning our future on-require events. Thank you again for watching. I'm excited to share some information with you. Some of this research was done with some of my colleagues a number of years back. Drs. Fiorentino, Garrett, McBride, Rosseth, Taylor, and I presented this information at a research conference back in 2018. So a quick caveat, this data may be outdated since it was collected so many years ago. Also, you will see some maps in the upcoming slides showing what the results of our study found. And you will notice that there are some states that aren't filled in either red or blue. So we coded red if the state had a discriminatory policy, and blue if the state had a progressive policy or an accepting policy. There are some states that aren't filled in because it was difficult to ascertain what states were doing from their websites. And so we were not able to collect data from all 50 states. This is an email I got back in 2015. I was heartbroken when I read this, and it made me think of an aspect of on-require that I had never considered before, and that is required membership that students must be in their school choral program to audition for an on-require, which seems like a very straightforward policy to have. But when we read quotes like the one that I just showed you, we see that choral teachers can be gatekeepers in this way, and that choral teachers that aren't supportive of their trans or gender expansive students may exclude them from on-require policies because they are gatekeepers. So these are the four aspects that we looked at that I'm going to show you today. Required membership in the school program. We looked at whether or not states had gendered ensemble names, aka men's chorus and women's chorus. Whether or not they had a binary uniform policy, so only two options, things like a tuxedo or a dress. And we looked at audition policy language to see if there was any language that could be considered discriminatory when we look through a gender inclusive lens. So you see that a great majority of the states require school ensemble participation. And as I said, this can become a big issue when we consider choral teachers as gatekeepers. So this is something that we may want to consider when we are looking at creating our own on-require policies here in Western Division ACDA. There is an increasing number of states that are using more inclusive and I would argue accurate names like SSAA on-require or treble on-require rather than quote-unquote women's on-require, right? So this is a trend that is changing, but you see that there are still some states that are using gendered ensemble names. There are a good number of states that still require a binary uniform policy. So this is something that we definitely can consider when we plan our own events. We also really dug through policy language to see if there was anything that might be problematic, and I'm going to share some examples with you. So, for example, in Kentucky, they were at that point naming their ensembles mixed, men's and women's. School participation was required, and there was a strict binary uniform policy. And here is some policy language that we found. It is required that the tenor and bass categories be reserved for males only, and the soprano and alto categories be reserved for females only. No females may audition on the tenor or bass parts, and no males may audition for the soprano or alto parts. So, not only is this problematic and discriminatory towards trans and gender expansive students potentially, but this is definitely discriminatory towards voice variant people. So, people like countertenors, right? So, a countertenor would not be welcome to audition for the honor choir in that state. Also, similarly in Tennessee, the policy language said female students may not audition as tenors for any all-state ensemble, right? And so, this is most likely designed to counteract the fact that it's much more difficult generally to get into an honor choir as a soprano than as a tenor. And they most likely had some sopranos that were trying to audition as tenors in an effort to more easily gain entrance. We did find some very inclusive policies. So this is from the Florida Vocal Association. They have this lovely policy on transgender students. Based on this policy from FVA, I was lucky enough to work with a team on the board of CCDA, the California Choral Directors Association, and we drafted a similar policy, which you can read here. I'm very proud of this policy because it very clearly states that we honor our trans and gender expansive singers, but it also speaks to the importance of vocal health. So that is a very sort of large scale analysis and looking at statewide policies. But I would like to give you a more personalized view, and this is data from my dissertation in which I spent a year talking with and observing 3 transgender high school students in their high school choral programs, and 2 of the 3 students were involved in honor choir in their states. And so I would like to share with you some experiences from Sarah. Her pronouns are she, her. She's a trans woman who sings bass too. And John, his pronouns are he, him. He's a trans man who sang tenor. In terms of honor rehearsal processes, this is something that we can all take to heart because we all, as choral conductor teachers, have rehearsals, and we can really be careful about the words that we use, especially when we say things like, let's have all the men sing here, when we really mean, let's have all the tenors and basses sing here.
Mr. seemed kind of scattered, and he and Dr. Stone messed up pronouns a lot, but the music was great, the concert was great.
So did you approach one or both of them about pronouns at the beginning of the rehearsal process?
Miss filled in, I talked to Dr. Stone, and he said he would forget, and he forgot.
Okay. Forgot in terms of like referring to you personally, or doing the like let's have all the men sing here thing?
Both.
Yeah.
Like how Miss States was better about it, but she kind of lost it as the weekend went on.
So in Sarah State, there are 2 levels of honor choir. There's state honor choir, and then there is all state honor choir a number of months later. So the students in state honor choir, the top scoring students go into the all-state choir. So Sarah had the opportunity to sing in 2 different honor ensembles that same year. And you can see that there was a problem in both instances with language because she was a woman singing bass 2. So saying, let's have all the men sing here is simply not accurate. We also talked about other logistics in terms of rehearsal processes.
In honors choir, there have not been issues other than like the default scripts that the coordinators read for instruction, or that read like the man will go here to change and and so those were all pretty default last year, and then this year at States they got the memo and would say like sopranos and altos and tenors and basses.
Does it make a big difference to you?
Yes, it was. It made me feel more like I had arrived in terms of being recognized in, as a whole.
It made me feel that I had arrived in terms of being recognized. That demonstrates how powerful our words are, especially in these mountaintop experiences like honor choirs. There are a lot of logistics, of course, that go into coordinating honor choirs. So I would like to share some experiences from John and Sarah as well about logistics. So to give you some context, John was a high school student who was out at school but did not have supportive parents, which meant that he had not had a legal name change. So his birth name or his dead name appeared on all school documents. So this means that when John sang in all-state choir, his name tag had his birth name on it, but he was allowed to room with 3 other cisgender boys from his school with the permission of those boys' parents. And this is a sort of a very sad story in which John describes that not only was his dead name on the name tag, but was also in the program.
My name was in the program. So like the kids that I met that I was like sitting next to, they brought a program up with us like on the risers to like know which songs were coming next.
Yeah.
And like this one girl that I had been talking to for like a couple of days, she was like flipping through the pamphlet and she was on the tenor 1 page and I could see like her eyes that she saw it. And I was trying to like clear the air. So I was like, okay, just like ask me the question. I was like, I know you're gonna ask me, just like ask me. She's like, what? What are you talking about? And she didn't ask me about it. So I was like, okay. So either she's like dumb as a post or
Just didn't want to go.
or she just didn't want to address it, or she just didn't care.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't care what the reason was, but
Yeah.
So that was like stressful, like sitting there like anxiously, like knowing that she's looking at the program.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like surprising how many like adults were like the woman who came in to like check in our room at night, she called me, but then she said goodnight, gentlemen. It's just like, I don't know, it's just like little things.
Yeah.
But I guess just the most nerve-wracking or like anxious thing was like the name tag and having to like sign in and out and worrying that people would like hear me.
On John's name tag, he actually scratched out the dead name and put his real name. But that is an element of cisgender privilege, right? None of the cisgender students had to worry about that, right? And the whole weekend then, when he should have been worrying about rehearsing and singing, he had to deal with all these other identity issues, and that's not really fair. So again, going back to Sarah's story for a minute, so she was out as trans at school and at home. She did have her name legally changed, and she was very proud of the fact that she sang bass too, One of my favorite quotes from the dissertation was, "I'm a girl and I'm a bass and I own that." And she really felt that this being a bass who's a woman made her very unique in the state choral organization, the State Vocal Association. So next I will show you a quote from Mr. Ames. That's a pseudonym. That's Sarah's high school choral teacher. "I was trying to be really sensitive for her and trying to look out for her without her knowing about it. I didn't want her having to be worried about, where am I going to go to the bathroom or get changed? So I contacted Molly, who was one of the organizers. What I didn't know at the time was that Molly, who was friends with my predecessor, and I, had previously had a conversation about Sarah. Her response to me was, absolutely no problem. She even arranged her standing position in the choir so that she was the bass closest to the girls, so she wouldn't feel out of place, as opposed to sticking her in the middle of a bunch of tuxedos." I just love this quote because Sarah's teacher had the foresight to think ahead and contact the organizers and make sure that Sarah was as comfortable as possible in various parts of the process. So I think that that's a model that we can strive for in terms of inclusivity. So this is something that we need to think about here in Western Division when we organize our honor choirs. What is our bathroom and our rooming policy going to be, right? We aren't bound to school and district policies. We can make our own. So I would say that we can be as inclusive as we possibly can be. Also, we need to think about, is there a repertoire approval process? I've heard anecdotes from people in other states who basically don't have any kind of approval process for honor choir conductors in choosing repertoire. And sometimes things get chosen that are not very inclusive for various reasons. Conductors may choose something that they aren't aware is a minstrel song, for example, or they may choose something that has some really outdated or problematic gender stereotypes, right? So I'd like to share with you some ideas about programming that I developed a couple of years ago with my colleague, Professor Eliza Rubenstein from Orange Coast College, and also the Orange County Women's Chorus. And not all of these are gender related, but I think if we're talking about inclusive programming, we can think about these things. Whose perspective is reflected in the text, and what message might that send? One of my favorite pieces of writing by Dr. Patricia O'Toole talks about pieces like I's the Bye, which is a Canadian folk song that's often sung by treble choruses made up mostly of cisgender women. And I's the Bye is slang for I am the boy, right? So what message might that send that we're doing a piece called I am the boy with a treble chorus? Does your list of repertoire include composers who are women and people of color? Does your list include out members of the LGBTQ community? Does the repertoire list reflect the diversity of the region? This is especially important for us here in Western Division because we are an extremely diverse part of the country. Does the text represent messages that might be construed as sexist, misogynist, homophobic, racist, xenophobic, or classist? If a piece is drawn from a folk tune, have you considered the background of this particular tune and what it might mean? For example, many Stephen Foster songs were used in minstrel shows, overtly racist performances of white people in blackface. Also, how are world musics and spirituals represented? Are they relegated to simply being the flashy closers? Another really important equity issue for us to think about that isn't necessarily gender related is fee structure, right? Often it is so expensive for families to send these students to honor choirs in terms of registration fees and application fees and hotels and airfare or gas, and it adds up really quickly and it becomes very expensive. How can we offset these costs so that we can make our experiences more equitable for all students? So thank you so much again for joining me for this short session. Again, as I said, this is just the tip of the iceberg in a complex and fascinating topic, and I hope to continue this dialogue in the Q&A and in the coming months and years. Thank Thank you so much.